All right, so we're COMP2068, and even though it says Lesson 2, Part 3 here, this is actually Lesson 3, Part 4, right? And what we're talking about now, I'm going to do another little PowerPoint. And this is the book that I recommend you getting. It's called Beginning HTML5 Games with CreateJS, if you can get this book, right? This is the book that I'll be following for the CreateJS piece, so I recommend that you get it. Now, you don't have to. You can always follow along with me, and if you have questions, we can certainly go through them. But this is the book that I'm using for reference. All right, so we're going to talk about, let's understand what this CreateJS stuff is anyway, right? We'll talk a little bit about Easel.js with HTML5 Canvas. So nothing to do with CreateJS, just Easel.js with Canvas, right? And animating with Tween.js, a little bit of Sound.js, Preload.js, and the dancing butterflies. That's what we're going to get to. We probably won't cover it all right now. So again, some people said, well, is CreateJS a game engine? And the answer is no. It's not a game engine. It's an API, right? It's a JavaScript library that you can use to build things like UIs, right? And you can also use CreateJS to make games, right? Why did I choose CreateJS? Because like I said earlier, in the first day we got here together, if you know ActionScript, then CreateJS is very easy to learn for you, right? At the same time, it's not a game framework, so you could use it to build other user interfaces with Canvas, right? So if you wanted to make an interactive user interface and you didn't want to make it something like that you see everywhere, because people see like the same interfaces where you see WordPress sites like everywhere on the web, right? Or something that's the same over and over again. Why would I make it that way when I can use something like CreateJS, right? When I can make something as interactive, I can add animation, sound, whatever I want to make. Now, CreateJS isn't it's a library of or a suite of other libraries. One of them is, and the main one we're going to be using, which I demonstrated last week, was Easel.js, right? But it also includes another library called Tween.js for tweening, Sound.js that does HTML5 audio playback, and Preload.js, which we'll be using for sure to preload all your images and other sound assets, because preloading is a very common way of managing assets on the web. So we don't have to wait for things to load. They're all preloaded, and so you see a loading screen, which is a very common thing. And then once your loading screen is done, everything's loaded, you can play. And there's no lag while assets are loading. So again, why? Because again, the toolkit for CreateJS came out in 2011. Flash Professional CS6 had it enabled for Flash to an HTML Canvas port kind of thing. And Adobe CC, Flash CC now, includes it native, right? So you don't have to download anything. Before it was a plugin, and now there is no toolkit for CreateJS. It's just part of Adobe CC. You can export to CreateJS. So if you're an animator, like a Flash animator or something like that, and you're very comfortable with Flash, you can use CreateJS, and you're good to go. Again, we're going to use a few JavaScript techniques, right, in order for us to learn CreateJS. Okay, so where is it? You get it from CreateJS.com, and this is the old site, the way it used to look. Now it looks a lot better than this. And again, we kind of did this already. It looks like this. One day I'll update my slides. Right, so this is where you get the framework, right? And we kind of did this last week as a little demo, right? Again, you can get the latest builds. You don't have to, you just use the minified file. The old versions before December were these. These have all been updated, so the updated versions are 0.8 for most of them. They've all gone up to 0.8. And if you want to know what the versions are, again, if I was to go back, if I go to download my CreateJS framework, it'll ask you what you want to download. And you can download the whole framework. You can go to the CDN. What's a CDN again? For people who don't remember? Huh? Anybody? Content Delivery Network. So you can actually, instead of downloading the files, you can link to them which is a common practice these days, linking to files that exist online as opposed to downloading files locally. And why would you want to do that? You might say, well, what if the web's not available? Then I can't run my stuff. Well, if the web's not available, yeah, you won't be able to run a web game, right? And usually the CDNs are like things like on Google and Microsoft and those kind of places. So chances are, from an availability perspective, it's like 5 nines availability. You're not going to like not be able to access them. And the other reason why you want to use a CDN is because once a user uses a library that's hosted on a CDN and it's inside his browser, it's cached. So if he goes to your site again, and he won't have to load that whole library again, so usage of your game or whatever, playing your game is faster. Your game can actually run a lot faster than it would if you were if you had to have a local file. Now there are traditionalists who like to have their local file on their server, so that way they can control the version that's on their server as opposed to download a version on the CDN, which is uncontrollable. They could update something, and some people worry about that, and that's why they have local files as well. Again, so these are the 4 libraries: Easel.js, Tween.js, and Preload.js. I'm just going to drop my zoom in a little bit. There's also a helper library called Zoe, which allows you to convert stuff, sprite sheets if you're a Flash user, right? I'm not going to be using Zoe in our talks too much, but you could. If I can copy the CDN URL from here if I wanted to, or I can download the zip file. If I download the zip file, it actually takes the download, and if you notice, Easel.js is at 0.8, right? Here's my zip load. It's Tween is at 0.6, Sound is at 0.6, and Preload is also at 0.6. So it's actually updated a little bit more than what my files say here on the PowerPoints. So a little bit better than before. We're getting closer to people. Actually, one person asked me last semester. They're like, "Well, this isn't even a full-fledged like API. They're not even at version 1. Well, this has been going since 2011, right? So this is going to be as close to version 1 as you're going to get this year, probably. They might have another update later this year. They usually try and update it twice or 3 times in a year, the framework, and they add additional really cool functionality. Okay. So Easel.js, let's take a look at that. So again, the most frequently used tool that we'll be using, very close to Flash and ActionScript. We need a canvas element in order for us to kick it off, and I showed that to you last week. Again, from a usability, I showed you this as well, that canvas is very commonly available. One thing I do want to mention though, and I kind of mentioned it in passing last week, and I want to kind of mention it again for you guys, is that the canvas tag and how we have our mapping of our pixels. Remember, in traditional Cartesian geometry, our 0, 0 point, our origin point, isn't up here, right? It's down here. When we do math at school, it starts here and we go up the y-axis and across the x-axis. But here on the computer, it doesn't work like that at all. We go across the x-axis as normal, but we go down the y-axis. Why? Because as we go down, right, it's height and width, but it's not generated from the bottom left corner. Windows are generated from the top left corner. So there's a bit of a geometry change in your head. So if I want an object to go up the screen, I want it to go in a negative y direction. Okay, this is basic stuff, basic graphics. But I need you to know that, so when I put negative y, for us to go up the screen, then you know, hey, how come you're putting negative y when you're actually going up the y-axis? Well, yes, to us, up is the top of the screen. To the computer, up is to the bottom. Just saying, if you guys don't know that. The canvas tag has a bunch of little attributes, and we saw these last week. An ID, which you need in order for us to target it and include it into our files. A width and a height attribute. And inside the canvas tag itself, we don't normally put anything in there except for any kind of fallback text to say, hey, FYI, your browser sucks and you need to upgrade it because it doesn't support Canvas, right? We can also do get context if you want to for the canvas element. We're not going to do that right now. And there's a toData URL type, which we can kind of send our, what kind of data is it going to send when we right-click on our canvas element? Will it make an image, a ping image, or a JPEG? Because we can actually copy and paste from the canvas element into onto our local files. How do we style it? We did that last week. We targeted my canvas and we styled it with a border and a background color if we wanted to. Background color I didn't use. I just used the border, right? So very simple styling for the canvas element. And again, I've got some, it says see canvas2.html. This is basically canvas2.html without the HTML file. All I'm doing, I would do is include a different file all the time. This is one way I can definitely access the canvas element, right? I can use this window.onload function, an anonymous function, a JavaScript way of accessing the canvas. I can say my var the canvas equals document.getElement.byId. We saw that last week, right? And then I said I can actually set the canvas width and height inside of JavaScript. All right, so instead of us doing it on the canvas element, if I want to do it in JavaScript, like inside my file, it might be good to do that too. Why would I want to do it in my file as opposed to hard code it on the index.html file? Anybody? Again, I can do it two ways. One way is like this, right? Width 200, height 200, or I can do it like this. The canvas, which I made a reference to here, right, is equal to 150, the width, and height is 150. Why would I want to do it this way sometimes and not the other way? Yes?
Because this way you don't have to change it once as opposed to all the change it.
Well, the thing is I can use both. Let's see, that's a trick question, right? I could set it as a default, and then I could change it. So let's say I wanted to make my game work both for desktop and mobile, right? Then I can detect, I can listen from my game, and if the viewport is desktop, right, then I can change my canvas element to desktop size. And if it's the viewport is mobile, a smaller size, then I can change my canvas element. And I wouldn't just change that. I would change a whole slew of stuff. Like I would change the size of my objects. Probably if I was going to make my game, I'd have two different images, one image for my regular desktop size, another one for mobile. So that's why we want to modify it here within JavaScript. We probably won't need to do that because I'm not going to focus on mobile. I'm not going to say, hey, make your game work on mobile. We won't have time. We just have so much to do, right? But in another life, if we were going to extend this class another few weeks, then yeah, we could probably have a 3-week stint of let's make it mobile, right? And we'd use this kind of methodology. Again, the canvas can draw 2D or 3D, right? And I think I showed you guys one of the frameworks, which is CreateJS, yes, in the beginning? So you can decide what your context is going to be for your canvas, 2D or 3D. Typically, our context we're going to be using is a 2D context because we're not going to use WebGL. It's a little advanced for what we're going to do with games, so that's probably not what we're going to be doing. And here's the 2D drawing API, right? I can set the context because I can use the getContext method, right, of the canvas element to specifically state that my canvas is going to be 2D. If I'm not using something like easel.js, I need to do this, right? So if I'm not using some kind of API to help me with canvas, this is basic canvas access, I need to do this. I need to kind of set the context or get the context and make it 2D. I can also set my fill style, and I can also choose a fill rectangle, a fill rect. This is pure canvas, by the way. There's no easel here at all, right? Where I can choose the starting point for my rect, which is 0, 0, right? My rectangle. The width of the rectangle will be the size of the canvas, the width of the canvas, and the height of the rectangle, my context, will be the height of the canvas. So I can fill my canvas with a color or some kind of rectangle that's colored or not. Of course, the result would be a big rectangle with a background. So again, there's a two-step process when I want to draw with colors and styles on the canvas itself. I have to set the fill and stroke styles and line width. This is how difficult it is to do. This is pure canvas, okay? And then I got to call a drawing operation that creates the shape. Okay, so here's my fill style. I say something like this. Context fill style is equal to green. So that's the color of my pen, right? And then fill rect, and it's going to start at x is equal to 20, y is equal to 20, and it's going to be 100 by 100 wide, right? And here's another one. I can choose the line width, how thick my line is, 5 pixels, right? And then I can set my stroke style to a certain color, RGB, a blue color, with full opacity. That's the opacity level 1, right? And then I can draw my stroke, my rectangle, not a fill, but the stroke. And again, I can separate between fill and stroke. Fill will be the inside of the rectangle. Stroke is the outside of the rectangle, the border. And I've done this both with a couple of different lines here. And then, once I've done that, if I want to move that rectangle around, I got to use this clear rect function, right, to create an erase. I can erase the rectangle right from there. Let's take a look and see what it does. There's a bunch of other ones: move to, line width, line cap, line join, all these other built-in functions for Canvas. And of course, you get something like this. So this code here is what I need to draw all this stuff here. I'll tell you right now, guys, it's almost the same in Easel.js, but I don't have to worry about updates. Here, remember, what I want you to think of the canvas is like a big erase board. Basic canvas utilization, if you will. If I want to use the canvas, HTML5 canvas, the only way I can draw to it and move objects is to take an object, draw it, erase it, reposition it, draw it, erase it, reposition it, draw it, erase it, and keep doing it over and over again in a loop, right? That's very cumbersome. I have to write a lot of code for that. And this is why it's easier for us to use Easel.js, because Easel.js does all that for us. But here's the code. If you were going to try and do it yourself, this PowerPoint presentation, which I'm going to throw up online later on, has all the code you need to do it on your own, if you wanted to kind of draw the canvas and do that stuff. I'm going to skip ahead. Line drawing, it does all that stuff. Arcs and paths. All of these things are done manually, and if you notice how much code there's a lot of code here. And all we're doing is using the context. Once we set we have a reference to the context, which is the 2D canvas, I can draw to it with basic canvas drawing tools. Okay, and I can set up the inner color and so on, an arc, right? I can do arcs. And rendering text is not easy either, because text is just pixels, like we showed you last week, like hello world. And remember, I did it with like one line. Canvas does it with all this, right? And same thing with coloring the text, adding shadows, all that kind of stuff. Same thing with using images and videos. So if I was going to make these dancing butterflies with the canvas move around, I would have to do something like this. I would have to set the images to the butterfly, my source, and then when the butterfly loads, then what I want to do is it's ready to go. I want to access this callback function, draw butterflies, to draw them on different positions, like this. This is what it would look like, right? To me, again, if I look at these kinds of things, and I included this lesson 2 little PowerPoint so you understand why I want to use Easel, right? Because like I said, I'm not going to go over how to use basic canvas too much because it's cumbersome, it's long, right? What I'd rather have you guys do is start using Easel.js and CreateJS. Okay, so again, some of the things that I want you to remember though, if you're going to look at the PowerPoint, like for example, context, begin path, context, move to, and line to, and all this stuff, the calls for the Canvas calls, the methods that we're going to use for Canvas are very similar to the methods what we'd use inside CreateJS with a little ease. It's a little easier than this. But again, we don't have to worry about erasing the canvas and redrawing. That's all handled for us. Any questions around Easel and Tween? There's some really good examples of what they can do. Like if I go to, to understand Easel or whatever, they have some really good documentation. Let's look at that for a second really quickly as well. Like for example, the docs for Easel.js, if I want to know an example of how to load a bitmap, which would be an image, I click on bitmap and it tells you what the bitmap class would look like. So here's my bitmap. This is the code. Var bitmap, declaring a new bitmap, is a new CreateJS bitmap, and here's the image path. It's very simple. Now I haven't added this bitmap. In order for me to show, if you're a Flash user, Rob, you're a Flash user, how am I going to show, I'm going to add this thing to the stage? What would I do? Basic action script.
When we do it, we have to make sure it's not shallow copy, so you can have data. Then you assign it to a sprite. But before you can even do that, you got to make sure it's ratioed and resized.
All that stuff is done, right? Well, let's assume that it's all ratioed and resized and everything's proper. The way we would do it is stay.addChild. To do the same thing here, right? And we would add child what? Bitmap. Done. Right? Now that image would be on the stage. None of that other stuff. No context, no moving things around, none of that stuff. And you can modify, and once that bitmap's on the stage, it's an object. I can do everything to it like you can in Flash. My bitmap .x plus plus, bitmap.y plus plus. I can move it around every frame if I want. Yes.
Could you pull it into an array and then just
Yes.
move on the array to add it?
Yes. Yes. It's all possible with JavaScript. You can do it all. You can put it into an array. Every object, JavaScript can accept arrays of objects, right? So you can create a bunch of objects like this bitmap object, an array of bitmaps, throw it into the array, and then from there you can do all kinds of stuff with all the objects, not just one. Yeah.
How does it handle shallow copy? Or is there?
There isn't really that. No, there's other things that it does. And again, what you'd want to probably do is use a preloader. Once you load everything up, it copies everything into the program. It preloads everything, and from there, you have it. You can access it right away. So there is no shallow copy.
Can I go var bitmap 2 equals var bitmap?
Oh, from that perspective, like you want to copy it, an actual copy from one. There's actually some other functionality you can go. If you go to the bitmap,
Flash, if you try doing that, you
no, it'll be bad. Yeah, yeah. No, you can make. What you could do is, if you're copying from one bitmap to the other, you wouldn't do that. You would create a new bitmap with the image, because the image would be loaded in memory, and you would access the asset manager. We create an asset manager together, and you would access that asset with a keyword, and then you could use it anywhere. Yeah, it's very easy, right? But if I look at the index for my bitmap, if you notice, it has all of these methods. I have my add event listener. So if I click on the bitmap, here's my add event listener, right? I can listen for a click, and then I can call a callback function called handle click, just like ActionScript, right? In order for me to do something with it. If I click the bitmap, I can make a button for the bitmap, as an example, right? So what I want to do is I want to leave it off early today. I think we've handled a couple things. I wanted you to take a look at the API a little bit closer and understand the differences between traditional Canvas, right, and what we're going to do with Easel.js starting next week. Because next week, what I want to start trying to get into with you, if I can get into it, and I'm just going to see if I have it ready. I'll make sure that I do. Yeah, I don't have it ready. But what I want to start getting into next week is I want to get more into trying to get things ready with CreateJS. So we're going to do a few more things a little earlier. And if we look at our outline, just from a pace perspective, because I want to make sure that you guys are on track. So here's our outline. Again, this week we're doing some object-oriented JavaScript. I'm going to probably hold that off until next week, and a little bit of TypeScript. I was supposed to do that this week, but I talked about HTML5 Canvas, right? The reason why I want to hold that off until next week is I want you guys to work on, without killing you guys, I want you guys to work on your game that's due next week, right? Which is due in week 4. Now you should have had this assignment week 2, but I moved it up, right, to week 3 because I wanted to give you an extra week to kind of get into it. All right, so a few changes from what we're doing, but next week we'll probably do a swap. So we'll do object-oriented JavaScript next week with TypeScript. So a little bit more stuff about TypeScript and why TypeScript again, more details around how to do this kind of stuff, and get right into it.